Good afternoon, my friends. I hope you are all well on this lovely sunny Wednesday. Thank you very much, first of all, to Gordon for the last 45 minutes or so, and his guest, whose name has completely left my brain. A pleasure to have you both with us, though. So we are on to the second session of the day. This is obviously an AI session. So today we're going to have a look at the timeline page in AI. We're going to look at the overall sort of functionality of the page and then a few ways to control it, and I'm going to show you a little bit of modular stuff at the end that relates to this as well. Okay, so without further ado, let's get on with it. So now what I've been doing in a lot of these tutorials, I've been starting with a blank project every time. I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to do it a slightly different way just to show you that it is possible in other ways. So we're going to go to the stage construction page. That's the AI icon, the stage section, and then the top one, the one with the proscenium, the thing that goes around the stage construction, like so. So as before, my keyboard shortcuts here are shift and drag with the left mouse to rotate, middle mouse button to zoom, and alt with the left mouse button to pan. I'm just going to select that fixture, and we can see it's selected because it's highlighted blue. Give that one a quick delete, like so. Okay, so I'm actually going to put back the same type of fixture, but I wanted to demonstrate that you can just delete fixtures and add a new one. So we're going to click on the screen fixture. I'm just going to make this a full HD screen. So obviously I can import a correctly proportioned model, or I can just distort the shape of this one, which is what I'm going to do. So instead of a width and height of 1:1, I'm going to change the scale width to 1.6 and the height to 0.9 to give it that 16:9 ratio. Then down in the resolution section, I'm going to put 1920 by 1080. There we go. Okay, so we've got a surface set up. Let's just go and put a test pattern on there just so we can see. I'm actually just going to add a couple of layers here as well. So it's important to remember that when we're working on the timeline, we can only use layers which are currently available in our layer widget. So now that I've got 4 layers here, when I go onto the timeline page, it will see that it will let me use 4 video layers. You can of course come back here at any point and click on the plus to add, or the trash can icon to remove layers. Okay, so let's have a look at the timeline page itself. So it's going to be the AI icon, the performance section, and the timeline section, which is the middle one. It's got something that looks very like a timeline on it, in fact horizontally running tracks and a vertical position bar. Okay, so I'm going to just bring my screen around just so I've got a slightly nicer view. Let's just zoom in a little bit. There we go. Okay, I'm happy with that. Okay, so the top portion of this screen, this is our sort of our 3D visualizer, the same as we see on our performance page and also in our stage construction page. The bottom sort of third or so is where we're going to add our tracks. So let's have a look at different track types first. So when I don't have anything here and I've got nothing selected, this button on the bottom left will add tracks. So what I'll do, because I can't select anything to show the alternative look, we'll get a track in and then I'll come back and show you how that changes a little bit. So I'm going to click on the plus button. So it's going to offer me the available video layers on the current layer stack. So as we saw, I added 2 layers to give myself 4 layers. It's also going to offer us audio tracks, control tracks, and cue tracks. So what are the difference between those types of track? So the first 4, the video layers. So with a video layer, we can play back pieces of media. So that could be an AIM file. It could be an AIM file with audio. It could be an input patch. So that could be a live camera patch, or it could even be a generative patch, or a still image. So pretty much the same selection of image-based formats that we have
on our main performance page. Audio track obviously allows us to add just purely audio files. That could be WAV or MP3. The control track allows us to add some slightly more intelligent control and automation to the way our timeline plays back. And our cue track allows us to create marker points within the timeline that we can easily access through the cue bar at the top of the screen. Now I'm going to look at all of these very closely and look at all the different functions. So if I felt like I skipped over anything there, don't worry, we're going to look a little bit more deeply. So first of all, let's get a video layer on there. I am actually going to start on layer 4, which is my test pattern layer. Okay, so once I have selected it from the list, we see this video track appear, and to the left of the video track we see this blue arrow which is pointing down at the moment. So if I just give that a click, you can see it's now pointing right, so it's folded up any parameters which we should see in there. So unfolding it again shows me that by default a video layer is just added with a brightness control, because that's the most basic form of control that you want on a video track. Now, as I mentioned, this button down here on the bottom left, when nothing is selected, this will add tracks, and we can tell it's tracks because it's giving us a horizontal icon within the image. But if I select the track itself, we'll see that that icon now changes to the add parameter icon. So if I give that a click, we'll see that we see a slightly different menu now. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to add all of these, but let's just have a quick look at what we've got here. So at the top, if we select all, that will add every single video parameter to the track. And it's not the full 100 parameters that are available on the layer. Most of those aren't really needed in a timeline environment. Or we can, instead of adding everything, we can individually add specific parameters. So we've got the brightness of our layer, the RGB value, HSC, hue, saturation and contrast, which are useful image control processes. We've got our position, rotation, scale, strobing. I'm going to use my mouse wheel to scroll this down a little bit, aspect mode, and also a volume. Now I can just come in here and I can select, let's add RGB. I can just click on RGB and it will add to the list. And you'll see the list stays here until I've added everything that I want to add. When I'm happy that I've added everything, I can just click off the list and it will disappear. Now what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to get rid of RGB, position and brightness, and I'm going to just use add all. So I'm going to select, and then I'm going to shift select my other layers. I could do these one at a time, but shift selecting allows me to multi-select and delete them all in one go. So once I've got them selected, the trash can will delete the selected tracks. Okay, so I'm just going to select that layer again. I'm going to open up my parameters and I'm going to select all, like so. Great, so we can see that all of those parameters are now listed down here. Now, before we do any keyframing of parameters, it's probably best that we get a piece of media on the layer. So I have a folder just here. Just go into here, there we go. Okay, great. So let's just get a piece of media onto the layer first of all and just sort of see what control we've got over the piece of media itself. So I'm going to just click and drag one of my pieces of media. Now you see, when I'm trying to drag the piece of media onto somewhere that I cannot or is not suitable for this type of media, the media area turns red. You can see when I drag it onto the video track, we see a grey outline, and that's a good thing. So if it's grey, we can basically drop the video there. So I'm going to just drop that one there. Let me just click off that layer just so we can see it a little bit more easily. Now, the observant of you will notice that at the bottom of the timeline we have time starting at 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, so that's 0 in timecode, and going up to the right. As we go to the right, time increases. So just to confirm that, I'm sure that made sense, but if I press play, you'll see this playhead moving along the line as our time passes. So, this clip here, we can see the area at which it starts, and actually when if you look at the bottom of the timeline pointer, you can see the readout. It might be a little bit small on the webinar. So I can see this one is starting around 8:08. That is a rather fine dance music heritage time there. And it ends at 28:01 or so. Maybe that was 8:00. Anyway, so the first thing we might want to do, we might actually want to adjust the position of where this video clip starts on the timeline. See, as it is, I've put it about 8 seconds in, so as the timeline's playing, we can see the timer here. And we're actually going to have to wait until that point until we see anything. There we go, so we can see that video clip starting there. So let's just stop that. Okay, so let's say that I actually want this clip to start at the very start of my timeline, at my 0 point on my timeline. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. The quickest and easiest way, if you left click on the piece of media that we're going to move and we drag it around, you can see these boxes here, these position boxes. They're telling us where that clip is currently starting. Now obviously sliding it around like this can be a little bit fiddly, so you can, if you drag this bar down on the right, this is going to zoom in, so we're going to have a much closer control. You can see I can almost get down to individual frames there. But that said, there are times when you want to be very accurate and you just want to type in a precise start time. So with the clip selected, and we can tell it's selected by the flashing outline around the clip, I am going to just type into this position box the starting frame, the starting time. Now I'm actually going to go for 00000000. Again, there's a couple of ways. I can hover the mouse and I can roll my middle mouse wheel like so. So that's doing my whole seconds there. Or I can double click and I can actually type in a value as well. So I'm going to just double click on that 5, put in a 0, and there we go. So we can see that clip is now starting at 0000 on our timeline. I'm sure that you are all familiar with timecode, but just to be certain, this is the standard approach to displaying timecode. We display in hours, minutes, seconds and frames. Okay, so we've got this clip. The clip plays for around 20 seconds or so. Now there could be some things that we want to do to change this. In fact, what I'm going to do, rather than sitting here for 20 seconds, I'm going to just double click in the timeline there. Okay, so let's think about the end of this clip. So currently when we get to about 20 seconds or so in the timeline, we're just going to end up with a dark screen because there's nothing, there are no events scheduled beyond that point. So let's just, for a start, let's think about using this clip and extending its life a little bit. So there are a couple of different things that we could do here. We could change the length of the clip. So if we change the length of the clip, we're just changing for how long the clip is playing for. So again, there are a couple of ways we can do this. We've got our length section here, and I can see this is 20 seconds and 1 frame long. I could come in, let's just double the length of that to 40 seconds, like so. Now I'm going to click off of there. Now I'm hoping that within the stream you can see in my video area here there is a black line just there. Now every time I move my mouse onto it, it gets covered with my playhead. But there's a black line, and what that denotes is that's the clip is playing through the clip, and when it gets to this black line it's just going to restart itself. So it's looping there basically. Now let me just click to there, double click there. So hopefully, there we go, we saw that little loop jump in there. It's not a smooth looping clip, this one, but it's actually quite useful for this demonstration. Just play through again and jump to the start there. Okay. Cool. So, this is changing the length of the clip in looping mode. So all we're doing is we're not changing any parameters like the speed of the clip or anything like that. We're just changing how long it plays back for. Now I used the value box here. The other way you can change the length is if you hold the shift button and left click and drag the end of your media area, and you'll see I can just drag this out until I let go of my left mouse button. And so now you can see we've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4 restarts. So by my calculation that makes it about 87, 88 seconds. There we go, 87 seconds. That was not a bad guess. Okay, great. So the key thing here is the clip is always playing at its original speed. It's just hanging around and looping for a longer period of time. Now, what we can also do, we might find that we have a clip that we specifically want to, instead of changing how long it loops for, maybe we want to change the timing of the clip. So we could actually time stretch the clip itself. So just to confirm what I mean by that, I'm going to give you an example as a VJ. I'm a VJ and I've got all my video clips which I've made in advance, and because I've thought about it, I always make my clips at the same speed. Personally speaking, I always make my clips at 120 beats per minute. And the reason for having a shared speed is that I can know that if I want any clip to be a certain BPM, I know I can adjust them all by the same amount. And now what we're doing there, we're actually speeding the clip up, or playing it slower, and that's what we can do here on the timeline. By instead of changing the looping period, we can time stretch it. So I'm going to click the switch here to change us on to time stretch mode. So let's just get a feel for the clip speed first of all. Okay, so it's quite a mellow clip. We'll try it with this one. I might actually have to get another clip in. So I'm on time stretch mode. I'm just going to hold the shift button and I'm just going to drag out to the end. Oops. Drag out the end of my clip like so. Now I'm hoping here that I'm going to stretch it enough that we will be able to see it really, really slowly playing back. So let's just stop and then press play. Yeah, so now there's almost no perceivable movement. I might actually have to make that a little bit faster, that clip. I've slowed it so much you can't see it move. He says shift, we'll go shift in the end. There we go. So it's really hard to see. If we look at... So I'm looking at these orange arrow here. If I hold my mouse you can see the components are moving. It's really slow. So anyway, you can either time stretch your clip really slow, or if you make it shorter than the original, it's obviously going to play back really quickly, like so. So you can see that difference in speed there. Okay, so I'm going to just put that back to its original length. I use the tab button to jump between the value boxes there. Okay, so maybe, we can change the length of the clip, we can change where the clip plays, we can change whether it's time stretched as opposed to looping. So we can also put some fade ins and fade outs. So you'll notice when I play this clip it just bangs straight in like so. But maybe we want a more subtle approach, we want it to sort of fade in. So the value boxes here for fade in and fade out are both in seconds. So I'm going to give that a 3-second fade in, and maybe I'll give it a 3-second fade out as well, like so. Okay, so hopefully, when I reset my timeline, we're back at the start. It started with black because my clip's actually going to fade in, so they're on the very first frame there is nothing to see. So when I press play, we'll see a 3-second fade in. There we go. And then hopefully when we get to the end of the clip, what are we on, 2017, so somewhere around where my mouse is, we'll start to see a fade out of the clip, like so. Okay, great. So really nice, simple, basic functionality for just playing back clips there. In fact, let me just get rid of that fade in. There we go. Okay. So when we've got the clip selected, we can also see, if you need, a reference to tell us exactly what the clip is here. So when I click off the clip, you'll see that disappears. If for some reason you have maybe updated the animations and you want to sort of go back and update the media on your timeline without having to come back in and bring in new media and change all your keyframing and all that stuff, you can just use this reassign button here on the right. So what it will do is it will just replace the existing piece of media with a specified piece of media, and any keyframing that you've already done will be applied directly onto that new piece of media. Okay, so let's have a quick look at some of the parameters. Good afternoon, Mr. Roger Troik. Good afternoon, Ali. I'm very sorry, I was going to try and do your surname then. I'm going to try it. It's Almezgagi. I'm very sorry if I got that wrong. Good afternoon to Eero Tullus, and of course my friend Sebastian over in Germany. He's a trooper, this man. He's a well-loved man in the AVO office. Anyway, let's think about parameters. So I click on the blue arrow just to the left of my track to expand the track and see what parameters we've got available. Now, we can't do anything until to the parameters whilst they're locked. So just to the left of each parameter, we see this padlock icon. So in its current state, it's showing they're locked. If we want to unlock a parameter, we can just left click on that padlock icon. It might be a little bit hard to see on the webinar. The lock part of the padlock has actually disengaged from the top when I've unlocked it. Just to make my life easier, I'm going to just go down and unlock all of these right now. Great. Okay. So once we have a track in place, what I'm going to do, I'm also just going to take that fade out off of the clip, because I can do this with layer intensity if I want. So once we have a track, we select the track, and then using the right button, the right mouse button, we can lay keyframes. The other way is to place the playhead at the specified frame, or I could type in a frame value here. So let's go for 7 exactly, like that. And then if I press the M button, it will make marker points on all selected tracks. So just to confirm that, if I go back to there and I then select a couple of tracks like so, then I press my M, we'll see that we get markers appear on all 3 of those tracks. Let me just get rid of those for the moment. Ooh. Okay. Okay, let me just select those, and delete. There we go. Okay, so I just want to have a little bit, slightly closer look at the parameters, and just see what we've got going on there. So I'm going to just put in a couple of bits for brightness, a couple of little cheeky bits like that. So when I've got my markers in there, I can left click to select the marker, and then we're going to get some controls which are specific to that parameter and marker type. So what I'm going to make this do, I'm just going to make it so that we go from this point, it's going to be full brightness, the second marker is going to be 0 brightness, and the third marker will return to our full brightness. So what I'm going to do, just select that second marker. I'm going to just type in, but again I could use the mouse, type in 0 as my brightness. Then if I press stop and play, then we should hopefully see a bit of a dip in brightness. There we go, as we would hope for. And then it's going to start to fade up in again. Great. Now, next to the parameter, we have curve type and curve fade. So, each of these has got a drop-down menu. Now, what are we talking about here? We are talking about interpolation. So when we talk about interpolation, it sounds really complicated, but actually it's a really simple thing. It's just a very programmer-centric way of describing the action. To interpolate is to go from one value to another value. Now the most common way of changing from one value to another is a constant linear value. So we go straight from one to another. Now actually we have added a few different types here. So, I'm going to ignore this second box just for a moment because these are not really relevant to a linear. I'm not going to go too deeply into these at the moment, although actually let's get the manual up. I'll just pull this over. Timeline. There we go. Keyframe easing. It's in the manual. Here we go. Okay. So, what we've got here on the right, I'm going to just try and zoom in a little bit here. There we go. Okay. So on the right, we've got our linear versions. That was the one. So it goes from this value to this value in a straight, standard, progressive. It has a continuous rate of motion. Now you can see that some of these other ones, these allow us to add a more motion graphic sort of style feel. So when you see a lot of graphics, they never normally move on a straight linear fashion. It becomes very robotic when you're working like that. So the other options gives us a way of slowly building up to movement, or slowly building in and then building out, doing exponentially, and various different methods. I'm not going to look at all these individually. I'm just going to let you be aware that they're there. That's page 51 in the AI manual. Now what we've done, so we have these different types, linear, snap, cubic, sine, circular, and then each of those has an ease in. So if it's ease in, it means it starts very slowly and builds up speed. If it is ease out, it means it starts quite rapidly and slows down towards the end of the interpolation. And if we have ease in and ease out, it starts slowly, and at the middle of its movement it's moving quite rapidly, and then towards the end of the interpolation it starts to slow down again. Now probably if you've never used interpolation methods, or easing methods as they're referred to in things like After Effects, if you've never seen these before, you probably really, it's kind of hard to comprehend their use. But those of us who are used to creating motion graphics and more natural looking screen automation, we know how valuable these are. Okay, so let's jump on to some of the other parameters and just see what we've got here. So what I'm going to do, in fact, I'm going to just throw in a few keyframes so that as I go down my list, I can easily just grab one. Okay, so next up we've got our RGB control. So as expected, that gives us individual control over our red, green and blue channels. Again, and we'll see these on all parameters, we've got the curve type and the curve fade. Hue, saturation and contrast, HSC, that gives us, as you might expect, controls over our hue, saturation and contrast, and again our curves. Position is going to give us an X and a Y position, so we're only dealing in 2 dimensions when we're working on the timeline, and that's because regardless of our 3D model, our texture is always 2D. Then we've got rotation, which is going to offer us rotation on 3 axes. X is the left-right axis, which means it's going to rotate from the top to the bottom. Y-axis is our vertical axis, that's going to rotate from left to right. And Z-axis is our backwards forward, so it's going to spin the whole image. Then we have our scale parameter, so that's a nice simple single parameter. We have our strobe parameter. So this one, I must admit, I always refer to the ArtNet parameters in the manual, because I can never remember the sub values of the strobe. So we go up near the top, I think it is. There we go, strobe. So we can see that 0 to 63 will give us a square wave with an adjustable time period. 64 to 127 will give us single frame adjustable. We've got random adjustable period and random adjustable sustain there as well. Then we have our aspect box. So that is how our image is applied to our screen surface. And then last but not least, we have volume control in case your video contains audio as well. Okay, so the other track types we've got an audio track. So again, I've got a, let's just go into that one there. back there. There we go. Let's just bring in an audio file. So when you bring in an audio file, you're actually, again, you see the thing where when it's red, it means don't drop it here. When it's grey, it's a great place to drop it. So you see that we actually get a little preview of the WAV file itself here. As I said, this could be WAV or MP3s. WAV will give you slightly better performance because it doesn't have to decompress it as it goes along. There is no limit to the amount of audio tracks you use, although they will use an amount of CPU power. But generally speaking, compared to video, they use so little overheads that I wouldn't really worry. In my testing, I do like 12 audio tracks, and it's fine. Okay, so what else have we got? We also have our control track and our cue track. So let's do the cue track first, because that's nice and easy. So with the cue track, what we can do is we can mark important points along our timeline, again by right-clicking. And as I right-click, you'll notice that they get added to this toolbar up on the top right side of the screen, like so. Now the colour of the cue itself is also quite important here. Green tells us that the cue is coming up. Just jump my playhead there. Red tells us that the cue has passed. Is current, I should say, and grey is past. So as we go along, if I just put my playhead there and we go play. Oh, and that is my brightness parameter causing me problems there. Let me just get rid of that centre one there. Yes, we do. There we go. I'm just going to make that clip longer just to make it a bit more easy to see. There we go. So as I play, we see this cue is green. It turns red when it's the current cue. And then when it gets to that point, and I realise now I've made quite a long distance to the next cue, and so you see it turns grey when it's passed. So I can click on these cues here, like so, just to jump to those positions. Now if I select the cue, we can also add a cue name. So I can double click in there. Oh. Q01. So that means that when I hover my mouse, we'll see that name above the bar as well. So they can be really useful to sort of have, like if you have a very long piece, or maybe you need to manually jump around during the timeline. These can be really useful. It's quite useful for a corporate situation as well, where you don't want to run everything on timecode, but you need specific starting points. Okay. So then last but not least, we've got the control track. So I've added the control track. So what does the control track let us do? So let us just put a marker here. So I'm going to select the marker I've added, and then we can actually look at what options we've got. So the control track allows you to add some more complex control for the playback of your timeline. Now what happens is I place a marker, and then when I select the marker I can actually go in and choose its specific function. So what have we got here? So we have pause. So what this means, the timeline will play up to this point, and then when it hits the pause, it's just going to stop and pause at that point until I press the button to continue. So we see it's playing along here. It's going to pause at this point, and then when I press the enter button, I can then continue. So again, that's really useful for a sort of a corporate, maybe you've got a walk-in look and you don't know how long they're going to talk for. So we can roll our, there we go, press the right button, Aaron. We can roll our timeline for the walk-in look. Person gets on the stage and it just stops and holds, and then they can talk for 2 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 hours, it doesn't matter. But as soon as they've finished, I can then press enter to continue my timeline. Okay, so, and obviously you can have multiple controls on a single timeline. So then we have the stop icon. So the difference between pause, so pause, it gets to that point, and when it stops, it doesn't reset, it just holds at the frame it's got to. Whereas the stop icon, there we go, will actually return us to the start and stop playing. We then have the reset icon. Okay, having a little bit of problem here. The reset icon. So the reset icon does like the stop, but instead of stopping the playback when it gets to the start, it will just continue. So it's sort of a loop, if you like, a very basic loop. Next, we've got the jump icon. So what happens is we choose the point we're going to jump to, and then in that jump icon we can actually tell it a destination. So it could get to this point, and then it could either jump here, or it could maybe jump all the way here, or wherever you want. The second and third to last icons are timecode icons. So this turns on whether or not the timeline is responding to a timecode signal. So we could have the first part is playing not on timecode, then when it gets to here it waits for a timecode trigger, and then maybe further along we could turn the timecode back off again. And then as a last option, we have the option to load a timeline when you get to this certain point. So if I had a timeline saved, I could then come into my timelines folder, and I don't think I have one yet because I haven't made any, and I can load it and specify it. So that means that it will play through, and then at that point it will then load an entirely new timeline for me. Okay, so I mentioned loading a timeline there, which made me realise that I haven't shown you how to save a timeline. So let's just say that I've got this timeline that I've programmed and I'm happy with it and everything. So the disk icon down here at the bottom, if I give this a click, this is now going to let me save my timeline somewhere. I'm realising there is no timeline folder in the distrib. Okay, I'm going to just save it there. Let's call it timeline 01. And then what I'm also going to do, let's just modify this one a little bit so it's obviously different. Okay, cool. I'm just going to save that as my second timeline. I'm going to just give it a drastically different name so it's very obvious. Let's call it Aaron's timeline 01. Okay, cool. Now I can come in and I can use this folder icon here just to load my timeline straight in, like so. So I can just double click there. There we go, we've taken us back to our original timeline that we had there. But obviously during a show that's not too convenient, and you might want to have all of your timelines available so that at any point you can just jump in and change things around. So just up here we've got a timeline select bar, and if you give that plus a click in the top, we can go down, we can select our timeline. So I'm going to add another timeline here as well. I think I put in timeline, so we're going to add Aaron's timeline. And again, on the right here, we can see the name of the timeline when I hover over the timeline. So now, just clicking on that other timeline icon will take me straight into there. Okay, so last but not least, I mentioned timecode. So if we click on this button on the right, this is actually just going to bring up our timecode control. Clicking the icon, the watch icon, will put us automatically onto timecode. We can give an offset for the timecode trigger. You can trigger the timeline with timecode from the main page or when you're anywhere in the software, in fact. That's totally and utterly doable. Now, very, very last but not least, I meant to get to this point 5 or 10 minutes before. I just want to show you very quickly. A few people ask about controlling some of the functions of the timeline remotely. This has to be done via a module at the moment. So I'm going to very, very quickly go AI, output section and stage patch section. And I just want to add the module in and just show you what's in here basically. So if we right click, we go to insert module, and there is a timeline section, and there is one called timeline external control. I'll just place that one on there. I'm going to just zoom in using Control Plus just so you can see a little bit more on my screen. Use my arrow keys to move the screen around a little bit. There we go. Okay. So this module, it doesn't need to connect to anything because it doesn't have a yellow output, so there is no need for it to be part of an active chain. You've got options here basically. You can either just come in and press these buttons manually, or you can send signals into these ports. So this could be either a MIDI signal, so that could be MIDI CC in, it could be MIDI key in, it could also be an ArtNet value, which you'll find in network, and ArtNet input. You've got large and small. I just use the small for this one. And so you can set up either a MIDI device or an ArtNet device. You can specify channels and universes for the ArtNet device, or channels for your MIDI device, and just connect them up as you need so that you can do those all remotely. Okay, so I hope this one made sense. I've actually just completely forgotten what I'm doing on my Friday session. I was going to tell you about that. The next session is on Friday, obviously. It's going to be Gordon followed by myself. I'm just very quickly typing in the page. So if we go to our let's go that one there. If you go along to avolites.com/online resources, you can find the timetable for the upcoming sessions. Later today, in fact, so that's 9 o'clock UK time. Cade over in good old US of A, he is part of our Group 1 team. He's a very experienced Titan user and trainer. He's going to be having a guest on tonight to chat. Then on Friday we have Gordon, who's talking about timecode basics. I will then be following up at 4:30 with a talk on external control of AI. So I'll be looking into all things MIDI, ArtNet. I'm going to be looking into OSC as well, which is a new thing that we've got in AI, OSC input. We've got a really nice way of working with OSC strings. I'm going to try and show you that. I've got it working with Ableton really nicely, so I'm doing Ableton outputting OSC via Max for Live and then straight into AI to control it. It's really nice. Yeah, so I'll be up at 4:30 with that, and then on that same day, again 9 PM UK time, Cade is back and he is giving us a webinar on show import and fixture mapping and user settings. So as usual, like I say, you can find out more information about upcoming classes on the link that is on your page. Thank you. At least Sam is listening, and I'm getting a cough from Ruben as well, which I think means he has also got some lessons on. Look for, I should be able to tell you his name of his company, and I really can't. Pimp the crikey out of it on the AI page, Ruben. So Ruben is a really long-term AI user. He knows quite a few good crazy tricks, and he's been doing a really good section of webinars. Not specifically just AI, although there's a lot of AI in there, but he's a man that understands that the video world is made of more than just one piece of software. So he does go into that. Thank you very everyone for tuning in today and checking out the stream. The video will be archived on the Avolites page after this session. Thank you all very much, and I do hope you all have a pleasant day.